The autumn wind carried the scent of dying leaves, and distant wood smoke through the streets of Millbrook. As Samuel Hartwell adjusted his weathered coat and approached the imposing brick building that housed the county orphanage, the year was 1895, and at 62 years old, Samuel had never imagined he would be walking through these doors with the intention of taking home a child. The Millbrook County Orphanage stood like a grim fortress against the gray October sky, its windows barred and unwelcoming. Samuel had driven his wagon into town that morning with a simple goal: to find hired help for his struggling ranch. What he hadn't expected was to discover that the only available workers were children, bound out by the county to anyone willing to pay their keep and provide basic education. Mrs. Gertrude Pemberton, the stern-faced matron who ran the institution with iron discipline, led Samuel through corridors that echoed with the subdued sounds of children who had learned that silence was safer than speech. The walls were painted a sickly green that seemed designed to drain hope from anyone who looked at them too long. "We have several boys of working age," Mrs. Pemberton explained in her clipped, businesslike tone. "Most are well-disciplined and accustomed to hard labor. The county requires that they be fed adequately, clothed appropriately for their duties, and provided with basic reading and arithmetic instruction." Samuel nodded, though something about the woman's clinical description of children as commodities made his stomach turn. He had been expecting to hire a ranch hand, not to become responsible for shaping a young life. They entered a large room where perhaps 20 boys, ranging in age from 8 to 16, sat at long wooden tables performing what appeared to be busy work, sorting screws, folding papers, and other tasks designed more to keep them occupied than to teach useful skills. The boys looked up briefly as the adults entered, then quickly returned their attention to their assigned tasks, with the practiced indifference of those who had learned not to hope for too much. "This is Timothy Walsh," Mrs. Pemberton said, stopping beside a sturdy-looking boy of about 14, strong back, good with animals, rarely causes trouble. He'd be suitable for ranch work. Samuel studied Timothy's face, noting the careful blankness there, the way the boy's eyes seemed to look through him rather than at him. There was competence in those features and resignation, but no spark of life or curiosity. "And this is Marcus Coleman," the matron continued, moving to a slightly older boy with calloused hands and broad shoulders, 15 years old, experienced with farm equipment, very reliable. Again, Samuel saw the same deadened expression, the same careful neutrality that suggested these children had learned to expect nothing and show nothing in return. These were not children who had been loved or nurtured. They were workers who happened to be young. "Are there any others?" Samuel asked, something in his gut telling him that what he was looking for wasn't in this room of broken spirits. Mrs. Pemberton's lips pursed in disapproval. "There is one other possibility, though I hesitate to recommend him. He's been difficult." She led Samuel to a smaller room where a solitary boy sat reading a tattered book, his back straight despite the uncomfortable wooden chair. The child couldn't have been more than 12 years old, with dark hair that needed cutting and clothes that had been mended multiple times. But when he looked up from his reading, Samuel saw something in the boy's green eyes that was entirely absent from the others: intelligence, defiance, and an unbroken spirit that all the institutional discipline hadn't managed to crush. "This is Michael O'Connor," Mrs. Pemberton said with obvious distaste, 12 years old. "Arrived here 3 years ago after his parents died of tuberculosis. He's intelligent enough, I'll grant you that, but he has an unfortunate tendency toward questions and arguments. He's been disciplined repeatedly for insubordination." Michael set down his book carefully and stood to face the visitors, his chin raised in a gesture of quiet dignity that was remarkable in someone so young. Samuel noticed that the book was a collection of Shakespeare's plays, hardly typical reading material for a child in an orphanage. "What kind of questions does he ask?" Samuel inquired. His interest piqued despite Mrs. Pemberton's obvious warning. "Impertinent ones," the matron replied sharply. "Questions about why things are done certain ways, suggestions for improvements to our procedures, complaints about the treatment of younger children. He seems to think himself qualified to run this institution better than those of us with years of experience." Samuel looked into Michael's eyes and saw a flicker of something that might have been hope quickly suppressed. This was a child who still believed in the possibility of something better, even after 3 years in an institution designed to break such beliefs. "Can you read well, son?" Samuel asked directly. "Yes, sir," Michael replied, his voice clear and steady. "I can read, write, and cipher. I've been teaching some of the younger children their letters when Mrs. Pemberton isn't watching." The matron's face flushed with anger at this admission of unauthorized activity. "You see what I mean? No respect for authority, always taking matters into his own hands." But Samuel saw something entirely different. He saw a boy who, despite being abandoned by the world, still cared enough about others to share what knowledge he possessed. He saw someone who thought beyond his own immediate needs and circumstances. "What kind of work needs doing on a ranch?" Michael asked, and Samuel noticed that the question wasn't about avoiding work, but about understanding what would be expected of him. "Everything," Samuel replied honestly. "Tending cattle, mending fences, maintaining equipment, helping with the horses. It's hard work from dawn to dusk, and it requires someone who can think for himself when problems arise." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "I've never worked with cattle, but I learn quickly, and I'm not afraid of hard work." Mrs. Pemberton seemed eager to conclude the transaction before Samuel could change his mind. "The county fee for taking custody of a child is $50, plus an additional $25 for his current clothing and educational materials. You'll be required to sign papers accepting full responsibility for his welfare and education." Samuel looked once more at Michael's face, seeing past the institutional uniform and carefully controlled expression to the bright, determined spirit underneath. This wasn't the experienced ranch hand he had come looking for, but something told him it might be exactly what he needed. "I'll take the boy," Samuel said firmly. Michael's eyes widened with surprise and something that might have been gratitude, though he was clearly trying not to show too much emotion. Mrs. Pemberton, on the other hand, looked relieved to be rid of what she obviously considered a troublesome burden. As they completed the paperwork, Samuel found himself wondering what he had gotten himself into. His ranch was struggling financially. His arthritis was getting worse with each passing winter, and he had no experience raising children. Taking on a 12-year-old boy seemed like the height of foolishness, but when he looked at Michael, who was carefully packing his few possessions into a small cloth bag, Samuel felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope for the future. The wagon ride to the ranch gave Samuel and Michael their first real opportunity to talk. The boy sat straight on the wagon seat, his eyes taking in everything around them with the intensity of someone seeing the world outside institutional walls for the first time in 3 years. "Why did you choose me?" Michael asked after they had traveled several miles in comfortable silence. Samuel considered the question carefully. "Because you're the only one in there who looked like he was still alive inside. The others, they've given up. You haven't." Michael was quiet for a long moment, processing this assessment. "Mrs. Pemberton says I caused trouble because I asked too many questions." "Questions aren't trouble," Samuel replied. "Questions are how we figure out better ways to do things. A ranch is a place where thinking can mean the difference between success and failure." As they crested a hill, Samuel's ranch came into view, a modest 2-story house with a wraparound porch, a large barn in need of paint, and several outbuildings, surrounded by pastures where a small herd of cattle grazed. It wasn't much to look at, but it was home, and it represented 30 years of hard work and careful planning. "It's not fancy," Samuel said, noting Michael's careful study of the property, "but it's honest work, and there's room for a boy to grow into a man here." Michael's response surprised him. "It's beautiful. I can see why you love it." That evening, as they sat on the porch after a simple supper of beef stew and fresh bread, Samuel began to understand that bringing Michael home might have been the best decision he had made in years. The boy's questions were thoughtful and practical. How many cattle did they run? What crops did they grow? What were the biggest challenges facing the ranch? "The truth is," Samuel admitted as stars began to appear in the darkening sky, "I'm getting too old to handle everything myself. My arthritis makes it hard to do the heavy work, and I can't move as quickly as I used to. I was hoping to find someone who could learn the business and maybe help me keep this place running. Michael looked out over the moonlit pastures, his young mind clearly working through possibilities and plans. I may not know much about ranching yet, but I'm willing to learn, and I promise you won't regret giving me this chance. Samuel studied the boy's profile in the starlight, seeing determination and intelligence that reminded him of his own younger self. I believe you, son, I believe you. As they prepared for bed, Samuel showed Michael to a small but comfortable room on the second floor, with a real bed, a desk by the window, and shelves for books. It was the first space Michael had been able to call his own since his parents died, and the boy's gratitude was evident in his careful handling of everything in the room. "Mr. Hartwell," Michael said as Samuel prepared to leave him for the night, "I know you paid money for me, and I know I'm supposed to work to earn my keep, but I want you to know that I'll do more than just work. I'll do whatever it takes to help make this ranch successful." Samuel felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "Good night, Michael. Tomorrow we start teaching you about cattle." As he lay in his own bed that night, Samuel reflected on the strange turns life could take. He had gone to town looking for hired help and had come home with something far more precious: hope for the future and someone to share the burden and joy of ranch life. What Samuel couldn't have imagined was that the quiet, intelligent boy sleeping down the hall would one day become far more than a helper or even an adopted son. Michael O'Connor would become the salvation of everything Samuel had worked to build, though the trials that would test them both were still years away. 3 years had transformed both the ranch and the boy who now called it home. Michael O'Connor, now 15 years old, had grown tall and strong under Samuel's patient guidance, his hands calloused from honest work and his mind sharp from the practical education that came with managing livestock and land. The struggling ranch Samuel had owned in 1895 was now one of the most respected operations in the county, largely due to Michael's innovative thinking and tireless dedication. Samuel sat on the porch in the early morning light, watching Michael work with a difficult colt in the breaking pen. The boy had a natural gift with horses that even experienced wranglers envied, combining firm authority with gentle patience in ways that earned the animals respect and trust. "Easy there, Thunder," Michael's voice carried across the yard as he worked with the young stallion. "Nobody wants to break your spirit, just teach you some manners." The transformation in both the boy and the ranch had not gone unnoticed. In the surrounding community, where once Samuel's neighbors had viewed him as an aging bachelor, slowly losing his battle against time and economics, they now saw him as a shrewd businessman who had somehow managed to find the perfect partner to secure his operation's future. Dr. Henry Morrison, who served as both the town's physician and unofficial banker, had been particularly interested in the ranch's improved fortunes. He rode up the lane that morning with the purposeful manner of a man conducting serious business. "Morning, Samuel," Dr. Morrison called out as he dismounted near the porch. "I was hoping we could discuss that expansion loan you applied for." Samuel gestured to a chair beside him, pouring coffee from the pot that always sat warming on the porch rail. "I figured you'd want to see the books and talk about collateral." "Actually," Dr. Morrison replied, accepting the coffee gratefully, "I've been watching this place for 3 years now. Your cattle operation has grown from barely profitable to genuinely impressive. Your beef brings top prices at market. Your breeding program is producing stock that other ranchers want to buy, and you've never missed a payment on any obligation." In the corral, Michael had successfully gotten a saddle on Thunder and was now speaking quietly to the horse, preparing for the next step in the training process. Dr. Morrison watched the scene with obvious interest. "That boy of yours has quite a reputation," the doctor continued. "People say he can look at a sick cow and diagnose problems that veterinarians miss. They say he can predict weather patterns better than the almanac. Some folks even claim he prevented a stampede last month by sensing the cattle's mood before anyone else realized there was a problem." Samuel felt a familiar surge of pride as he watched Michael work. "He's got gifts, no doubt about it, but more than that, he cares about this place and everything on it. Makes all the difference in the world." Dr. Morrison set down his coffee cup and pulled out an official-looking document. The loan committee has approved your application for expansion funding. $5,000 at 4% interest with the ranch's collateral. It's enough to double your herd size and upgrade your facilities. It was more money than Samuel had ever imagined having access to, representing the possibility of transforming their modest operation into one of the largest ranches in the territory. But it also represented a tremendous risk, the kind that could wipe out everything they had built if markets turned bad or disasters struck. That's generous terms. Samuel said carefully. What's the catch? Dr. Morrison smiled. No catch, exactly. But the committee did express some concerns about succession planning. You're 65 years old, Samuel, and while you're in good health, ranching is a young man's business. They want assurance that if something happens to you, the operation will continue under competent management. Samuel understood immediately. They want to know about Michael's legal status. Exactly, right now. He's technically still a ward working off his indenture. If something happened to you tomorrow, he'd have no legal claim to this ranch or any authority to make decisions about its operation. The loan committee wants that situation clarified before they release the funds. In the corral, Michael had successfully mounted Thunder for the first time, his calm confidence helping the young stallion accept this new experience without panic or rebellion. It was a perfect metaphor for how the boy had approached every challenge on the ranch, with patience, skill, and absolute determination to succeed. What are you suggesting? Samuel asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Formal adoption. Dr. Morrison replied, make him legally your son, with full inheritance rights. It protects the bank's investment and gives Michael the authority. He needs to keep this operation running regardless of what happens to you. The idea wasn't new to Samuel. He had been thinking about adoption for months, but had hesitated to raise the subject with Michael. The boy had never known him as anything but an employer, and Samuel wasn't sure how he would react to the suggestion of a more formal family relationship. That evening, as they sat on the porch after supper, Samuel broached the subject with characteristic directness. Michael, we need to talk about your future here on the ranch. Michael looked up from the veterinary journal he had been reading, his expression immediately serious. Is there a problem, sir? Have I done something wrong? Just the opposite, Samuel assured him. Dr. Morrison came by today to approve our expansion loan. $5,000 to grow the operation. Michael's eyes lit up with excitement. That's wonderful. We could add that section of grazing land to the south, improve the breeding stock, maybe even build that new barn we've been planning. All of that's possible, Samuel agreed. But there's a complication. The bank wants assurance that the ranch will continue to be well managed, even if something happens to me. Understanding dawned in Michael's intelligent eyes. They're worried about legal succession. Exactly. Right now, if I died tomorrow, you'd have no claim to this ranch. Everything we've built together would likely be sold to pay debts and taxes. Michael was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the implications. What would you need to do to fix that? Samuel took a deep breath, feeling oddly nervous about the conversation. I could adopt you legally, make you my son in the eyes of the law, with full inheritance rights. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Michael stared out over the moonlit pastures, his expression unreadable in the shadows. You've already been like a father to me, Michael said finally. You gave me a home when no one else would. You taught me skills and gave me responsibilities. You trusted me with important decisions and treated me like family. Samuel felt relief wash over him. Then you'd be agreeable to the adoption. More than agreeable, Michael replied, his voice thick with emotion. I'd be honored to officially become your son. The legal proceedings took several weeks, but by Christmas of 1898, Michael O'Connor had officially become Michael Hartwell, legal son and heir of Samuel Hartwell. The transformation was more than just paperwork. It represented the formalization of a bond that had been growing stronger with each passing season. The expanded ranch operation proved even more successful than they had projected. Michael's innovations in cattle breeding and pasture management resulted in healthier herds and higher profits. His reputation as a natural stockman spread throughout the region, bringing buyers who specifically wanted to purchase Hartwell Ranch cattle. But success also brought attention from less welcome sources. The Baxter brothers, a family of land grabbers who had been systematically buying up struggling ranches throughout the county, began making inquiries about the Hartwell property. They've been asking questions around town, Samuel's neighbor, Pete Williams, mentioned during one of his visits, wanting to know about your loan situation, your cattle numbers, even asking about Michael's background. Samuel felt a chill of concern. The Baxters were known for using pressure tactics and financial manipulation to force ranchers into selling at below-market prices. Their interest in his ranch could only mean trouble. Let them ask questions, Michael said when Samuel shared Pete's warning. We don't owe them anything, and we're not interested in selling. But Samuel's years of experience had taught him that men like the Baxters didn't give up easily. When they wanted something, if they had set their sights on the Hartwell ranch, they would find ways to create problems that might force a sale. His concerns proved prophetic when their cattle began falling sick with a mysterious illness that defied identification. The local veterinarian was baffled, and other ranchers began to whisper that the Hartwell operation might be cursed with some kind of plague. It's not natural, Michael said as they examined another affected cow. The symptoms don't match any disease I've read about, and it's spreading in a pattern that doesn't make sense for a normal infection. Samuel trusted Michael's judgment implicitly, especially when it came to cattle health. If the boy suspected something unnatural about the illness, there was probably truth to his suspicions. Their fears were confirmed when they discovered evidence of poisoning, traces of a toxic plant that didn't grow naturally in their area, scattered near the water sources where the sickest cattle had been drinking. Someone's been sabotaging us, Michael said grimly, and I think we both know who. The realization that they were under attack from enemies who would stop at nothing to destroy their livelihood filled Samuel with a cold fury, but it also filled him with pride as he watched Michael respond to the crisis with mature determination and strategic thinking. What do we do? Samuel asked, realizing that he was now looking to his adopted son for leadership in this fight. Michael's answer showed the depth of his transformation from orphan boy to confident young man. We protect what's ours, and we make sure the people responsible understand that the Hartwell family doesn't back down from bullies. How will Michael and Samuel fight back against the Baxter brothers' sabotage? Can a young man prove himself against seasoned land grabbers? Subscribe to our channel to witness the dramatic confrontation that will test everything the Hartwell family has built together. The spring of 1899 brought crisis to the Hartwell ranch in ways that tested every lesson Michael had learned and every bond he had formed with the man who had become his father. The sabotage campaign orchestrated by the Baxter brothers had escalated beyond poisoned water sources to include cut fences, spooked cattle, and mysterious fires that threatened their hay stores and equipment. Samuel, now 66 and increasingly dependent on Michael's sharp eyes and quick thinking, sat in their kitchen reviewing the latest damage reports with grim determination. The attacks were becoming bolder and more frequent, suggesting that their enemies were growing impatient with the ranch's stubborn refusal to collapse under pressure. They hit the north pasture fence again last night, Michael reported as he returned from his morning inspection ride. 50 head of cattle scattered into the hills. It'll take us most of the day to round them up, assuming we can find them all. The systematic nature of the attacks was wearing down both the ranch's resources and the spirits of the few hired hands who had remained loyal through the troubles. Samuel could see the strain in Michael's face, the weight of responsibility that had settled on shoulders still too young to bear such burdens. Maybe it's time to consider their offer, Samuel said quietly, referring to the Baxters' latest proposal to buy the ranch at half its actual value. We could take the money and start over somewhere else. Michael's response was immediate and fierce. No, this is our home, our life's work. We don't surrender to bullies and thieves. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of multiple horses approaching at speed. Through the kitchen window, they could see dust clouds suggesting a large group of riders coming up the lane toward the house. Samuel reached for his shotgun while Michael checked the loads in his revolver. They had been expecting the Baxters to eventually abandon subtlety for direct confrontation, and it appeared that moment had finally arrived. But the riders who emerged from the dust cloud weren't the Baxter brothers and their hired guns. Instead, Samuel found himself facing Sheriff Tom Bradley, accompanied by 4 deputies and looking like a man who would rather be anywhere else in the world. "Morning, Samuel," the sheriff called out as the group pulled up in front of the porch. "I'm afraid this isn't a social visit." Samuel stepped outside, with Michael close behind, both men keeping their weapons visible but not threatening. Sheriff Bradley was an old friend who had served the county honestly for 15 years, but he was also a political appointee who answered to the county commissioners. "What can I do for you, Tom?" Samuel asked, though the formal tone and number of deputies suggested he already knew this wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. Sheriff Bradley dismounted and pulled out an official-looking document. "I've got a warrant here to search the premises for evidence of cattle theft. We've had reports that you've been rustling stock from neighboring ranches to replace animals lost to disease." The accusation was so outrageous that Michael felt his anger flare like a struck match. "That's a lie, and you know it, Sheriff. Our cattle are clearly branded, and we've got bills of sale for every head we've purchased." "I know what I think," Sheriff Bradley replied carefully, "but I've got to follow up on sworn complaints. The Baxter brothers filed formal charges this morning, claiming you've stolen over 100 head of their cattle in the past 3 months. Samuel felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place with sickening clarity. The Baxters had orchestrated not just the sabotage campaign, but also this legal attack designed to destroy their reputation and provide justification for seizing their property. "Tom, you've known me for 20 years, Samuel said quietly. "Have I ever given you reason to think I'm a thief?" The sheriff's discomfort was obvious as he avoided Samuel's eyes. "It's not about what I think, Samuel. I've got legal papers signed by a judge, and I have to serve them." Michael stepped forward, his young face set with determination. "Then search all you want, Sheriff. You'll find that every animal on this ranch belongs here legally." The search took most of the day, with the deputies examining brands, checking bills of sale, and interviewing the ranch hands. Michael accompanied them throughout the process, providing documentation and answering questions with the confidence of someone who had nothing to hide. But confidence wasn't enough when facing enemies who were willing to manufacture evidence. As the search neared its end, Deputy Hayes made a discovery in the far pasture that changed everything. "Sheriff, you need to see this," Hayes called out from near a grove of cottonwoods. "I found cattle with altered brands." Michael's heart sank as he rode over to investigate. In a secluded area near the creek, Hayes had found 6 head of cattle bearing brands that had clearly been modified. From the Baxter B to something resembling the Hartwell H. "This is a setup," Michael said immediately. "Those cattle weren't here yesterday when I checked this pasture. Someone planted them here overnight." Sheriff Bradley examined the altered brands with the expertise of a lawman who had seen every kind of cattle theft scheme imaginable. "These brands were changed recently," he admitted, "but the fact remains that they're here on your property because someone put them here to frame us." Michael insisted. "Sheriff, use your head. Why would we alter brands so obviously? If we were really rustling cattle, don't you think we'd be more careful about it?" But the planted evidence provided exactly the justification the Baxters needed. Within hours, word had spread throughout the county that the Hartwells had been caught with stolen cattle. The bank, already nervous about their expanded loan, called in the note immediately. Neighboring ranchers, many of whom owed their own success to the Baxters' financial influence, began to distance themselves from the accused rustlers. Samuel felt his life's work crumbling around him as the full scope of the Baxters' plan became clear. They had systematically destroyed his ranch's reputation, financial standing, and legal position, leaving him with no choice but to sell to them at whatever price they offered. But Michael refused to accept defeat. That evening, as Samuel sat in defeated silence, his adopted son was studying maps and making plans with the determination of someone who still believed justice was possible. "I'm going to prove we were framed," Michael announced, "and I know exactly how to do it." Samuel looked up with tired eyes. "Son, it's over. We can't fight the law, the bank, and the Baxters all at the same time." "We don't have to fight them all," Michael replied. We just have to expose the truth about what they've been doing. Michael's plan was dangerous and required precise timing, but it represented their only hope of saving the ranch and clearing their names. Using his knowledge of the local terrain and the Baxters' methods, he set out to gather evidence that would prove the conspiracy against them. For 3 days, Michael shadowed the Baxter operation, documenting their movements and gathering proof of their sabotage activities. He photographed altered brands in their holding pens, recorded conversations between Baxter employees discussing the frame-up, and traced the source of the toxic plants that had been used to poison their water sources. The confrontation came when Michael presented his evidence to Sheriff Bradley in front of the county commissioners, the bank president, and a crowd of local ranchers. The photographs, recordings, and physical evidence he had gathered painted a clear picture of systematic fraud and conspiracy. The Baxter brothers have been running a land grab scheme, Michael announced to the assembled crowd. They sabotage ranches, plant evidence of rustling, then buy the properties at distressed prices. We're not their first victims, and we won't be their last unless someone stops them. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. Faced with proof of their crimes, the Baxters had no choice but to flee the county ahead of arrest warrants. The bank, embarrassed by their hasty loan recall, not only reinstated the Hartwell financing, but offered additional funds for expansion. Sheriff Bradley, red-faced with shame at how he had been manipulated, personally delivered the written apology and cleared criminal record to the Hartwell ranch. I should have trusted my instincts instead of following those legal papers, he admitted. As the dust settled from their victory, Samuel found himself marveling at the transformation of the frightened orphan boy he had brought home from the county institution. Michael had become not just a skilled rancher, but a man of courage, intelligence, and integrity who had literally saved their family's future. You know, Samuel said as they sat on their porch that evening, watching their cattle graze peacefully in the moonlit pastures. When I bought you from that orphanage, I thought I was getting a hired hand to help with the ranch work. Michael smiled, understanding the deeper meaning behind his father's words. What did you get instead? Samuel's answer came from the heart of a man who had discovered that love and family could be chosen as well as born. I got a son who saved everything I hold dear. I got someone who proved that the measure of a man isn't where he comes from, but what he's willing to fight for when everything is on the line. As the stars appeared in the vast sky above their ranch, both men understood that their victory had been about more than saving property or clearing their names. It had been about proving that a family forged by choice and strengthened by mutual respect could overcome any challenge the world threw at them. The orphan boy who had once been bought for $75 had indeed saved the family, but not in any way Samuel could have predicted. Michael had saved them not just from financial ruin or legal persecution, but from the despair that comes with facing overwhelming odds alone. The incredible journey from orphan to hero proves that family is defined not by blood, but by love, loyalty, and the willingness to sacrifice for each other. What did you think of Michael's transformation from abandoned child to the savior of the Hartwell Ranch? Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of courage, determination, and the unbreakable bonds that unite us in our darkest hours.